All right, so we have been talking about relationship series lately. We've been looking at the Bible verse, talking about loving God and loving one another. And so this morning I'm going to continue talking on that. And so I have like an overview verse that I want to share. And then, that's kind of going to be like a little bit of my theme where I've felt coming from this morning. So it's Philippians 2, 1 to 5. So I'm going to read it all out and then we'll go from there. So it says, "Is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ? Any comfort from his love? Any fellowship together in the Spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate? Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another and working together with one mind and purpose. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of yourselves as better than thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had." So my first point this morning in talking about relationships and friendships is to be approachable. So as I hope people would have felt coming into this place this morning that they were welcomed. And I think we do this quite well here in this church. You know, who has walked into a new place, a new church, or just visiting somewhere and no one's come up to them? It's been like super awkward. You walk in and you're like, someone going to come and say hello? Like you feel like you have to push into that. So my encouragement this morning is let's be approachable people. So I was thinking back to when we came here for the very first time. Antonio and I were driving around Australia. We came in March. We were here for 3 weeks. We walked in. We didn't even get in to church before we got welcomed. Sparrow was outside at the gate and he's like, "How are you going?" And he's up there shaking hands and super just like warm to be here. So glad that you're here. Where are you from? And so ushered in, and then we came in and there was welcomers at the door. There were people at the bottom of the stairs. And it was just like, oh, this is nice. It's a bit of a warm welcome. And then Pastor Brian, like, how good is our pastor? Our pastors are awesome. And I think Pastor Brian is so approachable. You can go up to him, have a conversation. He's always there for a chat, ready. And it's so encouraging to be around people and to feel that welcome feeling from Pastor Brian. Who when they're walking down the street sees, when you see someone who looks a little bit sketchy, you're like, "Ooh, I'm going to cross the road now. I don't want to have a conversation with them. They might beat me." I certainly used to feel that a little bit. I was very scrawny, so I'd cross the road a lot when I was younger. And then quite the opposite of that, when someone's not so scary looking, they're quite friendly. Ant and I, the other weekend, we went down to Deloraine on a Saturday, and we went to some markets, and we kind of started strolling into these markets. One of the guys had a stall set up there, and he kind of saw us from afar. I kind of, when you catch someone's eye, and he's like, "Oh, nice beard. Looks like you got a bird's nest growing in there." And I was like, "Thanks. No, just a couple of eggs or something." But it was like this super friendly, approachable. He obviously felt like he could say something to me, and I wasn't going to turn around and stab him or something because I was in Deloraine. Like, it was. I mean, I love Deloraine. It was great, but I obviously came across as approachable enough that he was able to comment and say something. So again, are we approachable people? Do people feel like they're able to come up to us and aren't intimidated and they feel warmed and welcomed? So I have another. How do we be approachable? Proverbs 15:13 says, "A glad heart makes a happy face, and a broken heart crushes the spirit." So, do you have a glad heart? Because if you do, you'll have a happy face. So And what does that a glad heart look like? At the end of the day, it's that do you love yourself? We've been talking about loving God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And it's that love yourself part that makes you have a glad heart so that you can be approachable. I suppose, what are the other practical things? It's just smiling. Like welcoming someone with a smile. Turn to your neighbor and smile and say, it's great to see you here. See? How nice is that? I love smiles. And eye contact. Just looking someone in the eye when you see them. Again, when Ant and I travelled around, you'd make eye contact with someone. You're like, oh, there's like a little connection there just by looking someone in the eye. Again, a handshake is so just important or practical, not like a limp, hello, like, how you going? And again, just being friendly and compassionate. Are we likable? The atmosphere that comes with being likable. Body language is a huge component of our communication when we're talking to someone. Are we with approaching people and meeting people and making friends, is our body language with them and engaged? Or are we just like, some people would say this makes you feel comfortable, but for me it's like, are you closed off a little bit? Or are you in? Again, sitting on your chairs, eager, listening, ready. It's so good. It's being approachable. So caring about people, which is ultimately what we're talking about this morning, is loving people. Do you care? Do you care enough to be approachable? Do you care? My second point this morning is about being intentional, which is more about like the making friends more than just the meeting friends. So the approachable part is when you meet someone and you start engaging with conversation with them and you're there asking questions. However, being intentional is making deliberate conversations. So what are my common interests? Whereabouts are you from? When again, Antonia and I traveling around, we would have many conversations with people, as you do, and it was often we would be the first ones to walk in because we're from out of town, and they'd come up to us and they'd ask, where are we from and what are we doing? And we were traveling. And so we would be able to have those conversations. And it was great with other people who were traveling as well because that was a common ground. But for other people, we would then ask the questions back and say, hey, we're traveling. How long have you been here for? Whereabouts did you come from before here? Where did you, what are you interested in? What do you enjoy doing? I think finding something common to talk about helps to build those relationships. I love people with beards because we can talk about beard stuff like beard oil and grooming and how often you wash it, and it's great, right? Just find something in common. Yeah. But it's finding a common interest, whether that's bikes or music or climbing, and what's your occupation and exercise or sports. Jesus, well, hopefully, there's a lot of people who will be in church or in society that we can talk about Jesus with because it's common. And I come back to that Philippians 2, 3-4. It says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. So be yourself. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. And don't look out for your own interests, but take interest in others too. So just because we don't have anything in common doesn't mean that I'm not going to have a conversation with them just because, well, I don't care about that. Take interest in other people. Motorbikes. I have a motorbike, which is nice, but I'm not really a motorbike rider. But if I have a conversation with someone about bikes, Zane loves, he's got a motorbike shop. This guy knows everything about motorbikes. And so I'll have a conversation with him. My knowledge is like this much, but his is like this much. But my conversation doesn't stop here. I go, yeah, I'm invested because it's an interest that he has. It's a passion that he has. So I'm going to engage because of the interest of others. Asking good questions about people is being intentional. Pastor Greg said when he came down recently, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, I think, but I couldn't get the exact quote, was a good friend is able to ask good questions. So are you good at asking other people questions? Asking questions about other people shows that you care because you're interested in them. And not just yes and no close-ended questions like, how old are you? Or what do you do for a job? Like, tell me about your job. Or what are your thoughts on this? Or, what do you think about, this topic? Asking them not just a closed-ended question, but a conversation which lets them talk. Being able to, guess what? People like talking about themselves. I don't think I've met many people who don't like talking about themselves or things that they like talking about. If you can find what they like talking about it, you'll get them talking. And a conversation between two people where I have been in some of these conversations and listening to other friends where two people will be having a conversation and one's just talking and talking and talking and the other person doesn't get a word in. Has anyone ever been in one of those conversations? And you're like, I'm going to go now. Good to talk to you. See you later. And those two people will have very different perspectives of the conversation. The person who's talking is going to go away going, oh, they were a great bloke. It was so good to be able to talk to them. Oh, I really feel like they got me. They were engaged. Oh, so great. And the other person's like, oh, man, next time I have to make sure I've got 15 minutes to talk to them because they just don't shut up. Like, right? So there's a bit of give and take as well, but there's being intentional, and it's making sure that you're asking enough questions. And if you find yourself, and can be one of those people who talks too much sometimes, but I'll try and go, ask a question. What do you think about that? And not being ready to respond straight away. I don't want to go, oh, great, I've got something I can throw into that conversation. But waiting and listening and actually caring about what someone says and valuing what they have to say. Caring about people is also remembering the things that they've said. So just because I've had a conversation with someone week 1, early on, and then I see them next week and I introduce myself to them again, they're going to be like, oh, we had like a chat for like 10 minutes last week. You forgot who I am. You're like, that doesn't come across very nice as like you care about me. So do we care about the people by remembering them? Don't let I have a bad memory be an excuse. That is the worst excuse because you can choose to remember. You can choose to remember and you can relay it. So Antonia and I, again, in our travels, we probably can't tell you everyone we've met. But we would go away from churches or from places where we've met people and we'll like discuss and we'll talk about the interactions we've had and the conversations. And so we could do pretty well between us, I reckon, coming up with the families that we've met, who they are, what they've done, their families, where they're from. So like there was Carl up in Catherine, and he had 4 kids, and he was a cop, and he had all these sick. Like we sat around the dinner table, we had like all these cool stories. He was from Hobart, and like it was awesome. He used to be a chef, and so these are things that you can remember. We remember purely because we were engaged in the conversations. We remembered. We went away. We thought about it as well and discussed, and said they're worth remembering because I care. Whether or not we'd meet them again, who knows? Facebook does help with this. If you can't remember, Facebook is great. Add people on Facebook because then you can just do a quick restalk and go, oh, that's right, I remember. Which which does help with the name forgetting, if that's an issue. Um, but again, and food. How good is food? Food is the best way to connect with people. Sitting around a table, having a meal, going out for coffee. So Dan and I, we go out for coffee probably monthly, I guess. We just have a catch up. And it's not only about the conversation, but it's being intentional with our time as well. It's intentional about time. That time together, again, around food also leads not only to being intentional, but also into being vulnerable, which is actually my third point. Now, I think it was Lydia who, when we had the 3 sessions a little while ago, she said that it's about the give and the take. How much am I giving? How much am I taking? And that's being vulnerable. How much am I willing to give? And this is, again, it's about keeping friends. This is about being vulnerable is the step from having friends or making friends or meeting people, making friends to then keeping friends. Vulnerability, me opening up and sharing, is going to grow that. And I got a couple of messages from John 15:13, and then verse 15, which say, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend. And then John 15:15 then says, this is Jesus talking, saying, I no longer call you slaves because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends since I have told you everything the Father has told me. Jesus called them friends because he shared with them. He was vulnerable with them. He was like, this is what my Father said. I'm sharing it with you because you are my friends. Are we investing in our friendships by being vulnerable and being open, having real conversations? When we first met the Overtons, they, again, approachable. Nathan came up and we started having a chat here at church. The very first week kind of just came up to us, and I didn't know who this guy was at all. I thought he was super young, which he is, but didn't realize he had 3 kids. It was like, whoa. But it was great. And so they invited us over for a meal. Again, food. So we went over and we started having chats and we shared around the dinner table. And then not only were we sharing just about our past and our things, but sharing real topics, again, about our relationship with God. What's your relationship with God look like? You know, what revelations have you received recently? You know, what's God doing in your life? That is the best. I love asking that question to people. What is God doing in your life at the moment? Because that's caring. When someone's able to share their heart and you can feel their heart and you're like, oh, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate getting to know you more and again, being able to give back. Another topic probably should be being considerate of people, which we were not so much with the Overtons. We didn't end up leaving their house till it was like 2 or 3 a.m. They have 3 young kids and had to get up in the morning, so we weren't very considerate. We checked. They kept saying it was fine. No, it's fine. We went downstairs and we had worship time together, and it was just like, it was so incredible, again, to be in a vulnerable, real situation with people. So I encourage us to let's be vulnerable. Again, the challenge of finding that place of wearing your heart on your sleeve and being able to share. Who's heard conversations where people will walk up to you and you go, how you going? You ask the question, how you going? And they just start pouring out their life story on you. And you're just like, oh my gosh, this is so deep. What the heck? I was just wondering how your day was. And they've shared. It's like almost overshared. And I'd say, be careful with, casting your pearls before pigs. Don't share everything out there if you've just met the person and you don't know whether they're going to reciprocate it, because they might not appreciate it. They might just go, okay, great, see you later. And that can leave you feeling hurt because you've opened yourself up to be vulnerable, which is fantastic, but you've been hurt because they haven't maybe shared back. But in saying that, don't block yourself up. Don't build up those walls. Break down those walls. Pastor Steve talked about it last week, about breaking down walls in community and in relationship. Let's be vulnerable together. No, not just one person being vulnerable, but each of us being vulnerable. Again, in your connect groups. Connect groups is such an amazing place. If you're not in a connect group, get in a connect group, because that should be the place where you can share in a safe place and be vulnerable together and go, this is what God's doing in my life. You don't have to share it with the world. Just share it with family, with community, with the people who care about you. As we open up ourselves, we let other people into our lives. And that's how God's created us to be. Again, the start of John. I didn't look too much into what it all meant, but man, it sounded great. Like, is there encouragement for belonging to Christ, comfort in his love, fellowship together, tender-hearted, compassionate? Then agree together wholeheartedly, coming together, loving one another. And I feel that loving together is sharing together. Sharing is caring, right? How many times have we heard that? Sharing's caring. So let us share together. Yeah. So I suppose let's continue to be vulnerable even though we're hurt. Pain, as I said, pain can be one reason why we block ourselves up. We put up our walls, and walls don't just keep other people out, they keep us in. We're trapped in our own, whatever this is. So as we break down walls, as we share, as we become vulnerable, as we're intentional, as we love and we share with one another, then we are growing in Christ, in those relationships. And that's what grows our relationships. I'm going to ask the band to come back up because I'm almost done. Caring for people looks like listening to them. It's getting to talk to people, and it's listening to people. It's being invested. Body language, loving people. It's hearing and remembering. Remember people's names, remembering their stories, remembering what the things that they've shared to you. You know, when they've asked for prayer requests, we say, hey, can you pray for this? Remembering the things that they've asked you to pray for. I know there can be a lot of information to take in, again, which is Antonio and I share with one another some of the things that we've heard so that we can remember, because we think that's so important in building those relationships. And our relationship with Jesus as Christians should be our foundation for everything. It's also our common interest. It's the one thing that joins us all here together this morning, right? Whether you know Jesus, and that is the reason you're here, so we can worship him. Whether you're here today because you don't know Jesus and you want to know people, and you're here because you want to know more. Ask and share together the journey and the things that Christ is doing in your life. Because this will help us grow to care, to love one another. So have meals. Be willing to share.